So someone signed up to your service, and you, naturally being excited about that, you give them what they want, which is typically price. That person then says thank you, and then proceeds to then quit the conversation, leave you, and never respond again. If that sounds familiar, this is what's going on, because that person is fixated on one variable, which is price and budget, because to be honest, that's the only thing they know. Their imagination is not only absolutely terrible, it's also full of holes, because they don't know what you know. They don't have your experience, they don't have your knowledge, they don't know the results they could expect, they don't even know the problem, they don't know the clarity, they don't have a vision of what they actually want. But they're not even aware of this, so they focus on one thing, and without you giving them a reason to show your value or your service is worth that arbitrary price that they have in their head, and without anchoring correctly to make them realize and respect how far that budget goes, they make a really ill-informed decision. And for us, we're screwed, because we can't control that decision or influence it, because we haven't given the information. Whereas conversely, if you take them through the following process and you can influence them, you can give the information needed, they naturally then start to see the value, they recognize it for the value and the deal that it is, or how much further it's going to take them, and they respect it. And you get a situation where people want to walk through the door. They want to sign up because they see what they're going to get, and they respect it, and they want it if they see it, because human beings, we're not logical. We are so irrational when it comes to making decisions in terms of working with people or services. So we can't rely on them to make the decision. We have to involve ourselves somehow. So this strategy, what you're about to learn, I use it with my clients. Some clients don't even need to get on sales calls. So they can just sign up people in the DMs using this process. And my personal belief is, I don't believe that coaches have to retrain to be master closers where you're facing 100 sales calls a day and you have to close a certain percentage. Misery. Instead, 90% of the sale can be done before someone even jumps on a call. Marketing. Getting people pre-sold where they want to, and they look for reasons to join you, and they look to qualify and go, I need to do it because. That's where we want to get people, rather than just facing an endless barrage of objection handling, trying to kind of force people's hand, because they can exit your service tomorrow. Whereas the people who want to come through and they've been conditioned to want it and see it and for the value that it is, this is way more enjoyable. So let's go into it. The first thing we need to consider is, well, in everyone's mind, there's a line, a finite line, which is what we call it price here. This is the price threshold. And without the information needed, and this is, I guess, the value or the worth they see, is your service worth it? Yeah, it's going to be under that. And their imagination is so poor, without any additional information, it's going to stay under it. And when you give out the price, they're going to go, thanks, bye, and then they're going to leave. Whereas what we need to retrain, or what we need to do, is we need to appreciate the fact that we need to build the value. We need to show them through what they're going to get, take them through the 5-step process we're about to go through, to the point where this value or the perception of worth increases beyond their estimate of price, or what they feel like the price is necessary. And then we're going to take that beyond. And then, up here, this is a deal where people want to come through straight away. And then down here, this is overpriced and not worth it. And very quickly, if I was selling FRI for £5,000, you'd find the money, because you realise the brand power of Ferrari. You're anchored, you know what a Ferrari costs typically, north of $100,000 plus. Where it's 5,000, you objectively know that's a deal. Where if it's 5,000 for, I don't know, a chocolate bar, well, that's so over expensive, because you're anchored differently, and you have the information because the brands have been in existence for so long. Anyway, that's a bit of a ridiculous example, but this is the premise between worth and price. So it's all well me saying that, but how do we actually do that? How do we raise that line so it tips over the action threshold? Well, there are 5 stages. Well, there are 5 stages that we need to take people through in order to best do that. The first one is we need to get clarity on the goals. But then we need to go through the struggles and overcome that. And regarding overcoming, we need to give them that process and a clear understanding that our service is going to be different, in order for them to then believe that we can get a result. Speaking of results, that's what we want to do. Results and expectations. And then we need to do the invite. This is how we build that value and the worth beyond that arbitrary line of price. And this price, it'll be different for different people. But if you're good enough at this process, you can raise this significantly above anyone's price line pretty much. But the main thing is most coaches don't entertain this. They skip straight towards the call, screw this up, and they don't give out the necessary information. So firstly, goals. And this is actually really interesting because if you get this right, you will build a lot of urgency and excitement just from giving them clarity of what their goal is. Because, okay, let's just say this. Let's just say someone's 20 stone. And I'm going to draw this here, and this will become clear of what this actually is in a second. And let's just say they want to get to 16 stone. Now, they're just fixated on weight. So you could say, cool, let me just get this right. If I could click my fingers and tomorrow you wake up and the scale is 16 rather than 20, but you looked identical to how you look now, that's telling me that's what you want. You'd be over the moon with that. Is that correct? Well, no, I want to change elements of how I look. Okay, so it's not just weight, it's visuals. What do you want to look like? Because people will be fixated on probably the wrong metric. They'll be fixated on the wrong goal. So instead of looking at just the number 16, if we then get them looking, well, at initial weight loss goal, where they go from, blob into a bit more of a lean physique, that can get them thinking. And you could do this with showing pictures of clients, you could do it with giving them clarity. And then the more you do this, where you give people detail about the end outcome, you're giving them a clearer and clearer picture, and you're kind of getting through this foggy window or this foggy mirror to the point where if they get enough clarity on what they want and what they like, that starts to crystallize. And let's just say, if we're talking about, I don't know if it's like male physique here. I mean, I'm only drawing a male because I am terrible at drawing. So that's a V-taper is easier to draw than an hourglass. But, start to build an X-taper, they start to build out, get a better picture. All of a sudden, they get more clarity on that vision. And that starts to create more excitement because then they will realize that they're spending time thinking about what they want in more detail, and you're giving them a better outlook to do that. Because up until this point, they may be focused on just one method to get there. Whereas if you invite the idea of looking for something in a bit more detail or something else they're looking for and reorientating that goal, it makes them realize that there's probably other things that they can do which they haven't considered. And that creates excitement because A, they're thinking about what they want, but B, there might be a new avenue which they haven't considered, which gives them hope. And that's a big thing because there's a reason why they haven't got to where they want to be, which leads us on to the next thing. Because why aren't they there right now? Well, due to my amazing artistic flair and talent, there's a massive wall in between them and their current position. And what we have to do is we have to understand this. And to be honest, a lot of coaches, a lot of people screw this up in general in sales because they talk too much. This is where you need to listen. You need to listen and you need to acknowledge. 90% of this is listening to the other person. And then 10% is basically repeat. You're understanding what those struggles are and what the barrier is, and then you're just repeating it back to them. It's like, okay, does that sound right? Does that sound accurate? That way they feel acknowledged, understood, and it feels like you then can best help and inform them to move forwards. And speaking about moving forwards, this is worth mentioning right now because a lot of people, if they don't know what to do when it comes to price, a really useful thing you can say in this circumstance is like, look, we can get onto price, that's absolutely no problem. There are service arms or service options which pretty much suit any budget, and I'm more than happy to discuss that later. But before we even get into that, is it okay if I ask a few questions to see if I can actually help you? Because that's the most important thing, if I have the ability to kind of help you with what I do. And if I don't, I can at least find out more about what you need, and I can advise you and pass you on to the person that can help. Does that sound fair? This buys you time. It buys you clarity on what their response is, but based on what their response gives you clarity on their urgency and their thinking, their position in the market. But more importantly, it buys you respect. It buys you just the fact that someone not rushing for a sale and you get that sort of decrease in sales tension, the person on the other end of that, they'll massively respect you because you're putting due diligence above profit. And that's quite rare. And if you can just do that, and this is where authenticity is important, this is a long-term strategy which builds reputation. And ultimately that's going to compound over time. And people will, even if you can't help someone, the impression you create on that person, they're more likely to recommend you because, again, you've put their needs above your own. You've put listening to them over just trying to convert them for the sake of converting them and earning money. By the way, if you found this helpful, this is one of 80 plus strategies that I teach inside my community, Scale with Service. There's currently a free trial on the link below. You can check out the description. But in there, I go over content creation, I go inquiries, lead generation, retention, service building, frameworks, offer creation, everything. The big thing I'm focusing on here is value building, but you can do that across your content as well, which is obviously going to be compound because it's not one-on-one conversations, it's one-to-many. But if you want to use that, you can check it out now. Anyway, back to number 3. Number 3 is basically overcoming it. And the best way I can describe this is, look, up until now, that struggle has created a huge gulf between where they are and where they want to be. They want to be, this person who has no neck and very weird bent arms and legs. They want to get there. But right now, there's a vast gulf and a river in between them. And we know that this river, that gulf, that wall, is that key struggle that you've repeated back to them and you've isolated. What you need to do here is you need to explain a bit of your process to give them the stepping stones needed to bridge that gap. Now, the key here is sufficient information. You don't want to overwhelm them. You want to stay on that one problem. You don't want to introduce new ones to create more inertia, but you want to break down how your process addresses that. Sometimes it could be a client example, sometimes it could just be going through the different stages. For example, if it's fat loss, you can talk about the fact that you spend the first 2 weeks measuring what they do, reading their behavior. And then you can go through the initial fat loss phase, you can show other people going through it. You can reference the flexibility of the diet options. Again, once you know the struggle, it's a little bit easier rather than me just trying to pull out of thin air for a random example. But you could explain how you don't have to live off chicken and rice. This client they ate pasta and they lost 20 pounds on pasta. The biggest thing for them though is we were able to do that because we knew the starting position and we exited. We massively boosted their metabolism at the end of the process so they could keep on the results. Most people anyone in the weight loss market, they probably start on average 8 diets a year, 1 every 6 weeks. But the thing is, they never exit one. They never exit a diet properly, so their weight springs back. They put on more weight than they started, and then they think they're the problem. They're not, they're just an exit. This is what we're going to do in step 3. So again, that could be this stepping stone here. It could be you explaining that. So it's just giving them that process in language and terms they can understand to give them hope that, this is different. This explains how I can get a result, or this explains why I haven't got a result in the past. You need to do this because if you don't, and it looks the same as what they've tried before, there's no reason for them to sign up with you because it's more of the same. You have to overcome that inertia. And this is why listening's so important, because when you have a service framework, again, I cover this in my community, it's a big focus of what I do because, believe it or not, articulating your service in a way that people want to buy influences people's wantingness to buy. So having clarity on your process, but mapping that to that struggle is absolutely key. And this is where probably a lot of sales are won. Or, in this part of the conversation where people go, that sounds good, that explains why I haven't done it, I want to know more, how? And then you can get onto that. But that's what we're trying to do here in the Overcome. And number 3, this is actually, I cannot believe how many coaches don't do this, but they don't before suggesting a call because they don't explain the results they could expect. They don't go through some estimate of what they could look like. And it's just so exciting because if I want to jump on a call because I know exactly that I'm going to add on this many pounds, this much tissue to my legs, I'm going to get the X frame I want, I'm going to build out, I'm going to thicken my lats doing this, and this is how I'm going to look, and then so-and-so, I'm going to look like that because he was at a worse starting position than I am now, and my genetics are pretty good. I want to know how I'm going to look like that. It's not giving away information, it's just giving me more excitement to find out how. So probably the way I can describe this is, right now, if they are this person, not a clock, what's that thing doing in the middle? If they're this shape now, and your process is going to take them to, this shape initial weight loss, and then it's going to take them to that shape. Again, it's process, it's going through the phases, and the more detail and vision you can give to that end shape, and you can start to flesh it out, and you get real clarity on what that looks like. Again, this really weird sketching that's going into this, and God forbid anyone look like this in person, but there we go. He's got no legs, he's got no calves, no one's got calves. Actually, what am I kidding? If I could look kind of like that with my little pea head, I'd be laughing, getting carried away. But the point is, if you're spending time going through that expectation, and we could reference a client's journey here, that's going to excite people. Yet I hardly see any coach do this. They don't spend the time in DMs to kind of lay down that expectation. And then once you've done that, last step is basically sending the invite. That's a door, by the way. And it's like, okay, instead of trying to push someone through a door and trying to ram them through and us drive them to do that, instead what we want to do is want them to walk straight through. And that is the difference. It's a huge psychological difference between someone being pushed through and someone walking through of their own volition. Once they want to know how they're going to achieve the results you've got, and they've got that clarity, and you've got all the energy behind those 5 stages we just covered, they will want to find out more. They'll want to find out the details. And if you said before, like if they asked about pricing, you said, look, there's options to suit pretty much any budget. And again, you can deconstruct, you can kind of adjust that, you can find out what the budget is. That'll be a separate video. I covered this in the past. It's inside the community of how you work out budget allocation. But once they realize that they're going to be in profit, you're going to save them more money they're going to spend, and they've got that excitement of getting clarity on what they're going to look like and knowing that this time is going to be different, that's value building. That's the difference between getting ghosted, giving out a price, but or more people wanting to find out more, wanting to jump on a call and entertain the idea of like, how's this work? Tell me more. So wrapping up, I want to give you 2 examples here, just to illustrate that point. If I inquire and I want to find out someone's price and they just repeat back to me, this is how much I charge, I do Google Sheets. That's not overly exciting. Whereas if I inquire about price, I find out someone not only got multiple service options that can help me, but they want to ask me first, and if not, pass me on to a coach who can best serve my needs. Naturally, I respect the person. And then if I have clarity on not just the fact I need to change my goal, I could probably undershoot in what I could achieve. I am probably struggling on volume. I'm not in progressive overload. I'm probably not eating enough. How do I eat enough? When I realise that I could probably drink more calories than I can, I probably can put on 60 pounds of tissue in the next 12 months because someone worse off than me that did that. I have a very flexible lifestyle to do that. People with worse constraints have done it. I have no excuse not to do it. And also, I'm probably going to gain an extra 10 pounds on what I thought was possible. And judging on a client like he showed me that was obviously worse now, but they've got significantly more results in 6 months than I have done in 3 years. I'm going to be excited to find out more about his process or her process. I want to find out how I can supersede that client who has less constraints to me, but they just have something that I don't. They're following a process that I don't know. What is it? I want to know. That's excitement. That's me wanting to jump on a call. We never want to give out price before actually building the value in what you do. In the middle part of the process, of steps 2 and 3, you want to listen more than you talk, and you want to repeat it back to them because that is acknowledging them. And then finally, I would suggest using voice notes rather than sending epic long essays, because tonality matters, conviction matters. And when people hear confidence in your voice and they hear that conviction, that naturally buys them into you even more. You have the ability to do that with voice notes, whereas text, they don't. Plus, text leads to people burning out for some reason. So you have a massive advantage using voice notes. But whatever you say, don't leave it up to them to determine your worth. Let you be responsible for building the value in what you have to offer, rather than their terrible imagination. And the coaches who are consistently signing up clients, they're not better at sales. They're not spending countless hours on sales calls, mastering closing skills. They're selling before they even get on a call. Their content sings to the person. This process builds the value and makes people want to purchase their service. And this is just one approach that you can use to get more clients into your business. My coaching community, Scale with Service, has loads of other strategies to do that. It has content creation systems, it has offer building systems, retention systems, client relationship, client management, systems, service building, marketing, lead gen, story strategy. Everything that I've learned for the past 5 years, helping over 450 plus clients to build their businesses, raising a collective $5.2 million worth of revenue in that time, I have put it into the community. There's a free trial, the link is below, you can access it and try it out for yourself. But a big reason why you might not be where you want to be, it might just be you're missing critical information that can massively change the outcome of conversations, content, and every other element and angle in your business. See you in the next one.